Florida Governor Charlie Crist. Governor, I was going to call you Charlie because I like you so much, but thank you for coming on. Why are you aboard the Obama bailout bandwagon?
Well, I call it a stimulus for the economy to try to help the people of my state. And it's really that simple, Chris. You know, you look at the kind of deficit that we're facing here in Florida. We just came through a special session where we had to cut over $1 billion more as it relates to making sure that we stay in balance. This program will help us with education, with health care, Medicaid specifically, infrastructure. These are the kinds of things that produce jobs. It could mean $13 billion to the Sunshine State. It comes at a time when we need it. People need jobs. It's about jobs, jobs, jobs. This will help us produce that, and I think it's important to move forward.
If you were Franklin Roosevelt and you were on the radio tonight and you wanted to explain the budget, the stimulus package, it's called, how would you explain it to people in a way that would make them feel confident that the economy could come back if it were passed? Explain it in simple terms, can you?
Sure, I think so. You know, this is a plan where your tax dollars that have already been sent to Washington, and I'm speaking to my fellow Floridians, you know, we have been a donor state for a long time, which means that every dollar we send up there, we get something less back. This gives us an opportunity as Floridians to get more back, to invest in education, you know, to build schools, to build infrastructure, to improve our highway system, to have the opportunity to make sure that we have enough for health care.
The city of Miami this week opened up 35 firefighter positions. More than 1,200 Americans showed up to apply for those 35 jobs. They camped out all weekend. How about Circuit City, going out of business, holding a job fair today for their own employees, both former and current? And how about this? This is in Austin, Texas last week. 2,000 people showing up for a job fair there, more than the organizers had ever seen. So on a day when Ford announced that its January sales were down 40%, GM is down 49%. Ford would be the one that is better off among the big three. On a day when California, the state of California, started paying its bills with IOUs instead of actual checks, why is everyone's hair on fire about Tom Daschle? As senators expressed shock and we, the media, hyperventilated about the new HHS vacancy and Tom Daschle's tax delinquency, President Obama kept his eye on the ball, turning quickly in today's interviews from a mea culpa on Daschle to the issue that matters above all right now to all of us.
We've lost 1 million jobs in the last 2 months. We can't afford another 4 million jobs lost this year. And every economist that I talk to projects that if we don't act quickly, we could end up seeing a much more severe situation than we're seeing right now. Ah, yes, the economy, which is in free fall, and I'm not being hyperbolic. We are in an economy that is in crisis. We're in an economic crisis that requires economic life-saving measures from the government, not because of some Democratic campaign promise, not just according to liberals on TV shows, but also according to economists, just about all economists. And not just TV show liberals and economists, but governors. And not just any governors, but Republican governors, men and women whose jobs depend on how the economy goes, who have to balance budgets and lay people off. California, as I said, is now paying in IOUs. Vermont's Republican Governor Jim Douglas met with President Obama yesterday to discuss the importance of the stimulus. Other Republican governors, including Arnold Schwarzenegger, Florida Governor Charlie Crist, and Connecticut Governor Jody Rell, have all signed on to a letter to put pressure on their own party senators to get a stimulus bill passed now.
House Minority Whip Eric Cantor of Virginia, when not taking credit for the stimulus program, he's ripping it. Even the Congressional Budget Office says it's not stimulative, he said on CNBC today. You've got that office saying that only 25% goes out in the first year. Actually, the Congressional Budget Office writes that the stim would have a, quote, noticeable impact on economic growth and employment in the next few years. And about that 25% claim, the office says it's ridiculous to try to measure how much of the money would be distributed by the end of this year, because the plan won't even go into effect until roughly the middle of the fiscal year. But by the end of September of next year, the office says 65% of this funding will have been spent. This guy Cantor is supposed to be one of the GOP's bright new lights. It's kind of new, seems fairly light. I don't know about the price.
Does Senator McCain object to President Obama's stimulus package?
Some of the stimulus in this package is excellent. Some of it, frankly, has nothing to do, I mean, those projects and others that you just mentioned, $6 billion for broadband internet access, that will take years.
$6 billion for broadband and internet access? What a waste. Who thought that was a good idea? Actually, there was this guy, John McCain, who ran for president. Yeah, when he was campaigning in Kentucky back in April. Remember that?
Though access to high-speed internet services that facilitate interstate commerce, drive innovation, and promote educational achievements, there is the potential to change lives. And government does have a role to play in assuring every community in America can develop that infrastructure.
So broadband infrastructure was an awesome economic idea when candidate John McCain had it on the campaign trail, but now that it is President Barack Obama's plan, it is offensive enough that it is reason to kill the whole last week. Republicans cited a Congressional Budget Office report as evidence that Obama's stimulus plan would not work. They said the report showed that most of the money in the stimulus bill wouldn't be spent quickly enough. It wouldn't get into the economy until after next year. One awkward but very important detail about this CBO report is that it doesn't exist. Yeah, the CBO says they ran some numbers on a small portion of an earlier version of the bill, but they did no report like what the Republicans are talking about. They did no report on the current bill that is anything like what the Republicans are alleging. It doesn't exist. Isn't there. Hasn't ever been in existence ever. That minor detail did not stop the Wall Street Journal's
I agree with Congressman DeFazio. He said only 10% of this bill dealt with infrastructure, and you could tell how extraordinarily frustrating he was with this bill. In fact, the big problem is defining what measures are necessary to stimulate the economy. Just a tiny portion of it was.
Are you saying, though, that you would have voted for this had there been more infrastructure funding in it? That's not what your conference was arguing.
If it had been a true stimulus bill, I would... Stimulus bill, just a tiny portion of it was.
Are you saying, though, that you would have voted for this had there been more infrastructure funding in it? That's not what your conference was arguing.
If it had been a true stimulus bill...
I'll tell you, Joe, to sustain a filibuster, we just need 41 Republicans to stay together. If we stay together in the Senate, like they did in the House, we can shelve this bill, we can hold it up. We're going to talk about this bill this week. How long this week the debate will go on, in other words, extended debate, a filibuster, I don't know. But I'm willing to put the 41 together if we can. And
we start 2009 in the midst of a crisis unlike any we have seen in our lifetime.
That is why I have moved quickly on an American recovery and reinvestment plan, a plan I am confident will save or create at least 3 million jobs. First job of my administration is to put people back to work and get our economy moving again.
You're very right about the size of the stimulus that's being offered in the alternative by Republicans. It's by any description just too small to be called a stimulus. But voters will not be checking with economists when they're hearing these arguments a couple of years from now in the congressional election.
And Republicans thus far are not putting forward very nuanced political messages about this. We saw the newly elected chair of the Republican National Committee, Michael Steele, went to the House Republican retreat this weekend and said, "That goose egg you put on the president's desk was a beautiful thing." We've had leading Republican senators saying that they hope that Republican senators might give 0 votes on this, just like House Republicans did. Whether or not they're going to be offering constructive amendments here doesn't seem to be part of their political messaging. Their political messaging seems to be a big NO. So a stimulus plan is meant to stimulate the demand side of that whole supply and demand idea, right? It's to get people buying and investing again. What's the most effective way to do that? Well, Moody's Investors Service looked into it. Moody's doesn't really play politics, they play money. And they say that every dollar spent on food stamps generates about $1.73 in economic activity. Every dollar spent on infrastructure, about $1.59 on economic activity. Tax cuts, which Republicans are ideologically committed to, they can have a stimulative effect on the economy, but not nearly as much, about $1.03. When you start talking corporate tax cuts specifically, you're down into negative territory. Every buck you spend to do that stimulates the economy about 30 cents. Feh. Despite that, Barack Obama okayed a slew of, quote, stimulus tax cuts. And what did he get for all of his "I'll extend my hand if you'll unclench yours" thing?